Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host, Michael, and this episode is Q&A number 52. Before we get into today's questions, big thanks to our sponsors, Precision Hydration, that you can find on precisionhydration.com. The best place to start with hydration and when it comes to optimizing how you plan your hydration for racing, especially if you're racing in longer and hotter or more humid races, is to take Precision Hydration's free online sweat test. That is simply a quiz that consists of a few simple questions that you can answer in a few minutes' time, and it's been validated against real-world sweat test data, so it will give you a very good ballpark estimate for how much you sweat and how much sodium you lose in that sweat, because everybody's sweat sodium content is different, and that will then inform your hydration strategy. In fact, you'll get that hydration strategy right away after you complete that quiz, so highly valuable stuff, and you can then choose to, if you want to, try your first box or tube of Precision Hydration electrolytes for free with the promo code ThatTriathlonShow, all one word, all caps. And big thanks to Roka. Roka is the world leading manufacturer of wetsuits, tri-suits, swimskins apparel, and high performance eyewear. You can find them on roka.com, that's ROKA.com. Roka have generously offered a 20% discount on your order when you use the promo code TTS, all caps. So the question for today comes from the United Kingdom, from Pat, who writes, "Hi Michael, what is your take on running in calf compression socks? After reading a few journals, I can't seem to find any scientific evidence to support them, but can find several studies highlighting the dangers with blood pooling in the foot because of the tight compression around the ankle, and other dangers of deep vein thrombosis, especially more so if you are female." Thank you, Pat. That is a good question, and very relevant, because when you go to races, whether it be running or triathlon, you'll see a lot of athletes wearing compression socks or sleeves. So it is highly relevant to ask whether they actually work, how do they work, and what are the proposed benefits of them. So to give that a bit of background on how they are supposed to work, compression socks, they work with graduated compression. So there is a difference between how high the pressure is around the ankle area compared to how high the pressure is around the knee. It's more tight around the ankle, so that's why it's called graduated compression. And this encourages blood flow against gravity in the veins back towards the heart. And by the way, this also works the same way in the lymphatic system with the fluid there, the lymph in that system. And that's actually the original application of compression garments used in the clinical settings. But without going too much deeper into that potential explanation of improved blood flow as the mechanism for all the proposed benefits of compression, there is another theory, which is that wearing compression garments might decrease muscle vibration, which potentially could reduce muscle damage and delay onset of fatigue. So these sort of mechanisms are related to both to recovery, but also to performance, perhaps at least in longer events where delayed fatigue might be of importance. So if we talk about the actual garments that you might use and what to think about with them before we go into the science of whether it actually does work. So graduated compression garments, when in studies that have been made, the garments that are used are supposed to be actual like medical grade compression garments where you can measure a specific pressure both at the ankle and at the knee where the compression garment ends. So for example, if we talk about the pressure, and remember there is a pressure differential there, so the pressure at the knee will be slightly lower than it is at the ankle. The pressure is measured in millimeters of mercury, mmHg. And just to give you a rough idea, if the pressure around the ankle is around 15 millimeters of mercury, that's considered mild compression. When it gets above 20 or so, between 20 and 30, that is moderate compression, and 30 or above, that would be quite high compression. A problem is that a lot of manufacturers of compression garments don't really advertise or publish the compression level. And I suspect that a lot of the cheaper brands are not at all graduated compression in the first place. So that might be a reason why they don't do that. Some of the more expensive brands, I think that they do make sure that they have graduated compression and that they also fall within certain parameters. But I guess that they think that it confuses people if you, which they might very well be right in actually. But that doesn't stop the fact that it would be nice if they would, for a lot of people, if they would actually publish those numbers so that we could tell whether we're having a compression sock that is mildly compressive or moderately compressive. And so we can compare it to the actual studies that have been done. So I did some quick Google searches here. And for example, I didn't find any pressure values in millimeter of mercury for brands like Compress Sport or Skins. I could find some information like this for 2XU and Sigvaris. I don't recommend any particular brand at all. I actually don't use compression wear that much myself. I actually have a pair of compression socks, and honestly, I can't even remember what brand they are. They are very rarely used, I have to admit. But either way, if you want to use compression socks and you want to get the potential benefits, make sure that try to make sure that it's actually gradual compression and a high enough compression level, like 20 plus minus 5 around the ankle seems to be reasonable. So if it's 15, that's okay. If it's 25, that's okay. So that's sort of the rough idea based on the research that at least that I looked at. So if we go into the science of compression and how it works, there is a very recent meta-analysis from this year, 2019, that's called Influence of Compression Sportswear on Recovery and Performance, a systematic review. Unfortunately, I haven't managed to get a full text access to this one. So I've only been able to read the abstract, which is never a good thing. But so I'm just going to briefly cover this one and then get into another one where I have had full text access. But basically this meta-analysis or systematic review included 40 studies in their evaluation. And they state that most studies do not demonstrate any beneficial effect on performance, immediate recovery, or delay in the appearance of muscle pain. They do, however, show a positive trend towards a beneficial effect during recovery. The subsequent performance improved in 5 out of 8 studies where subsequent performance was measured, and the perception of muscle damage was reduced in 5 out of 6 studies. In summary, the use of compression garments during recovery from exercise appears to be beneficial, although the factors explaining this efficacy have yet to be established. No adverse effects of the use of compression garments have been demonstrated. So there you go, a fairly straightforward, not much in the way of performance benefits, but potential improvements in recovery and also in the ability to back up performances. That's what they meant there with that the subsequent performance improved in 5 out of 8 studies where it was measured. That might be something like doing 2 time trials back to back on consecutive days, or even in some studies I've seen, they do it with just 1 hour rest between, and you wear compression socks in between. So backing up performance is a potential application as well. Now, the other meta-analysis that I looked at, which is the one I'll rely on more, even though it's a bit older, but simply because I've had full text access and been able to read all of it, is called Is There Evidence That Runners Can Benefit from Wearing Compression Clothing? And it's from 2016. It included 32 studies rather than the 40 in the more recent meta-analysis. And these 32 studies had a total of 494 participants in them. 16 of these studies included elite or very well-trained subjects. 13 of them had recreational athletes or participants competing at the regional level, and 3 of them involved untrained participants. And as I said before, a graduated compression is the gold standard and what's used the most. And 26 of these 32 studies used a graduated compression. So that's the vast majority of them. One thing to point out with both of these meta-analyses or reviews, and also with any individual study that you might come across, is that a problem with investigating the effects of compression wear is that it's very difficult to have a good controlled study. Of course, most studies have control groups, so they have a group that does not wear compression socks. But the problem is that they're not blinded. So whereas in a medical study, you will just give the control subjects a pill that just looks and tastes like any pill, but it doesn't have any particular effect. But the participants don't know that, so they all have the same sort of placebo effect, or the placebo effect cannot act as a big confounding factor. But in compression studies, because it's very difficult to, or most studies haven't used blinded control groups, this placebo effect can be a big thing, actually, that people that are in the group that wear compression wear just simply might believe that they will get some sort of improvement, and therefore they improve, and it might not be because of the compression wear itself. Some studies do use some sort of blinding, so that might be something as simple as just giving socks that are like very lightly compressed, or even just long socks rather than ankle socks would go some way, at least for people that have never actually used real compression wear. But unfortunately, it seems that a lot of studies, they haven't even done that minimal amount of actually giving long socks to everybody. But the control group has simply been wearing ankle socks. Anyway, that being said, I'm going to read a bit from the abstract, which summarizes the findings of this meta-analysis. And it says that there were no statistically significant effects on running performance, which included times for half marathon, 15-kilometer trail running, 5 and 10-kilometer runs, and 400 meters sprinting, or maximal and submaximal oxygen uptake, blood lactate concentrations, blood gas kinetics, cardiac parameters, including heart rate, cardiac output, cardiac index, and stroke volume, nor on body and perceived temperature. However, small positive effect sizes were found for time to exhaustion in incremental or step tests, and on running economy, including biomechanical variables, as well as clearance of blood lactate, perceived exertion, maximal voluntary isometric contraction, and peak leg muscle power immediately after running, and markers of muscle damage and inflammation. The body core temperature was moderately affected by compression, while the effect size values for post-exercise leg soreness and the delay in onset of muscle fatigue indicated large positive effects. So that summarizes it, and it's a bit wordy and lengthy, but to conclude, it simply says that there are limited potential positive effects of compression wear for variables related to endurance performance. These are variables such as time to exhaustion, running economy, RPE, and muscle temperature. But there is benefit, a clear benefit in terms of reduced soreness after exercise and muscle damage and inflammation. So that pretty much wraps it up. It's the same conclusion essentially as we already had in the newer meta-analysis that I haven't read in full, but data on performance seems limited, although that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing to wear compression socks in races. It might be unnecessary, but probably not bad. And you can always get a placebo effect, and the placebo effect is as valid as any other effect if it makes you faster. So by all means, go for it. And the recovery aspects seem to be real. There is a positive effect on how quickly you can recover, how sore your muscles feel the day after, and actually potentially in terms of actual muscle damage, measured from various markers of muscle damage as well as inflammation. So those are some useful things to consider, and whether that means that you should wear compression socks during the workout when you are inflicting that damage, or during the race, or if it's okay to just start wearing them after you finish the workout. I actually don't know. It might be best to wear them during and after. But I guess you can always, this is something that you will need to experiment with, and what you then perceive will guide you in the right direction, because it is individual. There is a certain variability to this, and not everybody will react exactly the same. those, I guess, are the main points. Definitely worth using compression socks. And after doing this Q&A, I will dig up my old compression socks and check what brand they are, whether they are actually worth having or if I need to get a new pair. But I think for the recovery aspects, it actually might make sense to use them. There is valid evidence for that. It seems for performance, not so much, but it probably doesn't hurt either. And it's not as if it's the most expensive thing in the world. There are a lot worse things to waste your money on. So compression gets a fairly positive sign off here in this episode. Just to address your second part of the question, Pat, when you read that you found several studies highlighting the dangers with blood pooling in the foot because of the tight compression around the ankle. Honestly, I haven't seen this. The first meta-analysis that I read from mentioned that there haven't been any adverse effects or anything like that. And I didn't find much else in the way of like reading about what you wrote there either. I honestly didn't find much about that, if anything, because it is really the reverse should be true. That was the original application of compression to get blood and to get lymph to move away from the feet and stop swelling, prevent swelling or reverse swelling, and those sorts of things. So it seems very counterintuitive to me that would be a risk. I did read somewhere that if you wear very tight compression sleeves for a long time because you don't have any pressure at the foot level, but then you have a high pressure at the ankle level, that might be a reason that potentially blood pooling might occur. But on the other hand, but I can't remember where I read that, first of all, which I tried to find it again, but then I couldn't find it again, which is a shame. It might have been on the Compressport website somewhere. But then on the other hand, on the 2XU website, I found something that said that general classifications of compression show that garments up to 20 to 30 millimeters of mercury at the ankle are suitable for everyday wear. And by that, they imply that you can wear them a long time. Compression that exceeds 30 millimeters of mercury at the ankle are more commonly reserved for individuals with chronic circulatory issues, and professional medical advice should be sought for products at these levels. So I honestly can't answer for sure the concern there that you had. From what I've seen, in certain conditions it might be a problem, and with certain levels of compression. But with the normal levels of compression that have been used in the studies, around usually 20 millimeters of mercury at the ankle, I haven't found much in the way to support that there would be any common adverse effects with compression. But if anybody has additional information, please email me to michael@scientifictriathlon.com, and I can do a follow-up and give more information if there is anything more to add to this topic. But that's it for today's Q&A. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed learning about compression, reading through the research and finding out what is actually known about it and what's still unclear. Remember to send in your questions, by the way, I haven't asked for more questions in a while, so perhaps it's time to do that. You can send in your questions as well to my email, michael@scientifictriathlon.com, and that's Michael with a K. And any question goes. It does not have to be technical or complicated. Sometimes I feel that I only get those questions, and it's fun to do some of those. I don't think that every Q&A should be like that. I think a lot of Q&As should be more basics and see the forest and the trees, not just the trees. So that's don't be afraid to submit basic questions, and also beginner questions. I don't think that we get anywhere near enough beginner questions. I do like to answer a lot of beginner questions, but any question that you might have essentially is welcome, and then based on how relevant they are to the majority of listeners, I will answer them in different order, but I try to answer all the questions that I get in that have relevance for even part of the audience. And remember to tune in every Monday and Thursday. Stay subscribed so that you don't miss anything. On Monday, for example, there is another mic flip where I am interviewed by Menachem Brody. He interviewed me for his podcast, the Strong Savvy Cyclist and Triathlete podcast. And I now republish it here on that triathlon show this coming Monday. So stay tuned for that, and more Q&As to follow on Thursdays. Big thanks to our sponsors, Precision Hydration, that you can find on precisionhydration.com. Go and take their free online sweat test to get your individualized hydration strategy and get your first box or tube of electrolyte for free with the promo code ThatTriathlonShow, all one word, all caps. And big thanks to Roka for sponsoring the show. Go and check out their wetsuits, tri-suits, swim skins, goggles, and high-performance eyewear, and get 20% off your order with the promo code TTS, all caps. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.